What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, we got off and running for the week with Switch 2 news, as it looks like, we're going to be seeing that system this week, at least according to reports, as well as a bunch of games that seem set up to be going to the platform, maybe even starting this year, and we're going to go over some of those here today. Also, we're going to be talking about Microsoft with their Xbox Direct coming up next week, and that fourth mystery game that actually could end up being a pretty big reveal, and we also got some new details around the Oblivion remake, because not only is it real, it looks like it legitimately is going to be a remake of this classic Elder Scrolls game. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below. And we're going to start today with Nintendo doing what could have been one of the funniest things ever. See, everyone, of course, thinking about Switch 2 right now as time is counting down to the end of March, when Nintendo themselves have at least placed a timetable on revealing the system fully. Well, they threw out this tweet here, where they say Nintendo Sound Clock, Alarmo, will be available in stores at participating retailers in March 2025. No Nintendo Switch Online membership required. Available while supplies last. So they got rid of that first barrier of entry of needing NSO to get the $100 alarm clock. Now, look, I will say the Alarmo, for what it is and who it's really geared toward, which tends to be as a younger audience, it's kind of a cool piece of technology just based on some of the stuff it's doing with radar and being able to detect if you're moving or not in your bed, sure. But every time Nintendo tweets out a message, immediately in the responses, it's Switch 2, where's the new system? When are you revealing it? Well, again, the good news is it doesn't seem like we're going to have to wait too much longer for that to happen, but at least you know you can look forward to something else in March, that being Alarmo at participating retailers. So there you go, check it out. Also, we did get a look at another patent, this one from Sony, and continues to at least outline how these different companies are going to approach streaming here in the future and trying to eliminate the most annoying part, which is the latency that happens when you're actually playing the game and you're pressing maybe to attack or move your character around. It's very noticeable in some games, not as much in others, thinking like turn-based RPGs as an example. Well, we can see those posted up. This is over on Tech for Gamers, says a new patent published by Sony wants to fix latency issues in games by predicting player inputs ahead of time. The AI system might use a camera to record the player's action or utilize controller inputs instead to make predictions. Now, let's say you have a spotty connection and it's sort of intermittent or in and out. In order to minimize those delays, it'll organically execute player commands, as in it predicts what you are going to press next, and it does it if you say timeout randomly and then drop back in. So let's say you're doing a combo and it's square 4 times, you've hit 2 of them, it then assumes you're going to hit square 2 more times, and so if there is a dropout, it can immediately pick up and press those for you, so you won't even notice if there are hiccups in your connection. And this isn't necessarily new, the idea of predicting button presses. Stadia, Google, was actually working on this like years ago, and unfortunately, well, in that case for Stadia, didn't really last long enough to see what other advancements they could have made when it came down to streaming. But, I mean, we see Sony doing a little bit more of streaming here and there, right? Especially with the portal that can now just access completely and doesn't need a PS5. Microsoft clearly doing a lot of it. We see Nvidia and so on. So streaming will continue to be around and continue to try to advance. I'm just curious if things like AI and even have a camera watch you press things will get us to that golden era where it's latency that's less than the latency, say, on your TV, so you don't notice it at all. Oh, and we did have an update that maybe is related to Sega's recent interest in reviving old intellectual properties. You can see this from Gamatsu, where they noted that Sega filed trademarks for Ecco the Dolphin and Ecco on December 27th in Japan. Those were made public today. And look, they're trademarks, so it could just be them doing the usual paperwork to keep everything above board. Could also be them maybe looking at Ecco and trying to figure out what they can do with it. Now, the last Ecco game in 2000 actually pretty well, like in terms of with reviewers. It was, I think, like an 84 on Metacritic. So for the most part, the last outing was pretty good for Ecco. Unfortunately, the one after that was canceled and we haven't had anything since. But could they come up with something new for Ecco the Dolphin? I mean, it would certainly be a unique game. I guess Maneater was the most recent kind of game like that I played, and it was fun. Wasn't incredible. Wasn't going to be one I remember 10 years from now, but it was at least a fun and interesting game, and I wouldn't mind seeing SEGA do something with Ecco the Dolphin, 25 years later now since the last one. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Switch 2, as we did have a report to start off the week that not only has placed when Nintendo will reveal the Switch 2, but also a bunch of games that should be slated for the system starting this year. Now, I was thinking about doing a separate video for the timing of the Switch 2 reveal, so I guess keep an eye out for that one. But when I started seeing the games kind of flowing in here and how people are corroborating it, how we've already heard about how Microsoft is seemingly heavily involved right now in the Switch 2 and preparing for its launch, it does make me look at the potential for a strong first year for Nintendo's next generation device, the successor to the Switch. It's been wildly successful for Nintendo, but to follow that up, you have to get off and running immediately. Seems like those are the plans that are set in place right now. We can see this is posted up. This is over on GameSpot. They are referencing Nate the Hate, his podcast that went up again to start the week on Monday, saying he's reporting that Konami's Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater will be among the titles available on Switch 2. As will Square Enix's Final Fantasy VII Remake and its sequel. We already discussed that. Remake seems to be going to Switch 2 and Xbox this year, and it'll be followed by Rebirth next year for both platforms. So Square Enix off and running as well. Sounds like Ubisoft will be going even deeper by bringing a port of Assassin's Creed Mirage for the Switch 2 launch window. The upcoming game Assassin's Creed Shadows is also said to be in the works for Switch 2, but not in time for the system launch. Not too shocking there, considering they're just having a hard time, it feels like anyway right now, getting Assassin's Creed Shadows into a good place for it to just launch in general, like for any platform. So not surprising to hear that maybe the Switch 2 launch would come months later. Maybe it's set for holiday 2025 as an example, but we'll see how that one turns out on Xbox, PlayStation, and then I guess PC first. The report goes on to mention that Ubisoft is doing more than half a dozen games for the Switch 2, including a game from the Division series, Rainbow Six Siege, and a potential compilation of the two Mario and Rabbids games. Earlier this month, a separate report from Nate the Hate suggested that Microsoft will bring Halo the Master Chief Collection and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 to both Switch 2 and PS5 in 2025. So I will say it's not surprising here that Ubisoft would be fully on board with the Switch, considering all the games that are going to go to the Switch 2, all right, are probably going to be sold much more than the counterparts on, say, Xbox or PlayStation, especially if they're older. So in a way, this would allow these different publishers to resell their games at a higher price point. Yes, there is work that goes into them porting it over to the Switch 2, but in their mind, if they show up with Assassin's Creed Mirage and it's $50 right out of the gate, whereas it did start at $50 on the other platforms, right? But now it's been marked down quite heavily in terms of sales, and they've already gone through their initial customer base there. On the Switch 2, yes, you could find a bunch of new customers, but also have it at that premium initial day one price point. So Ubisoft being there right away, not shocking. I think we're going to see a bunch of, that's the biggest thing here is, I think across the board, we're going to see publishers, third parties, all over the place, and this could be one of the strongest launches for Nintendo when it comes to third-party support, maybe that we've ever seen. I know the Wii U is actually stronger than people remember, and a lot of that was because the Wii did really well for Nintendo, so a lot of these companies thought, yep, obviously it's a sure thing. Didn't work out so well. But in this case, it does seem to be more of a sure thing than ever before with Nintendo, so third parties will most likely be there in force. And hearing about Metal Gear Solid Delta, I mean, that's a game we're still waiting to hear about the release date. If it is shown, say, at Nintendo's press event or something that's coming up here in a month or two, and it's there very close or at launch for other platforms, it's going to be very compelling for people, and the Switch 2, that with the hype, might end up making that one of the top or even the top selling version of the game. So a lot of potential here for third parties, provided they're able to pull it off when it comes to the newer system and make sure there's no issues or hiccups at launch. And Nintendo also have a slate of first-party games. Could be a big first year for the system. Next up, let's take a moment here to hope and dream when it comes to Xbox's Direct, which most likely will lead to profound disappointment, but also could lead to some really cool stuff and a lot of excitement if it lines up correctly. Now, what am I talking about? Well, it appears that that fourth game in the Xbox Direct that's currently a mystery could actually be a bit bigger than we were expecting. So what we were hearing is the potential for Final Fantasy 16 to be there and maybe Shadow Drop, as Nate was kind of like kicking that around as a place for them to make that announcement and that release. But but it seems like it could be something brand new and something that people have been waiting for. This we can see is posted up. This is over on Windows Central, who says there's also a mystery fourth game, and I won't spoil what it is, but our sources indicate that it is a new entry in a legendary Japanese IP, which has decades of history and should make a lot of fans happy. Okay, decades. So minimum, I'd say 20 years, right? Multiple decades there. Could be 30. But in this case, I say hopes and dreams because people have already been kicking around ideas, and some of them seem a bit far-fetched. Let me give you an example. Persona 6. While it seems like the color scheme does at least line up with Xbox, as it's apparently going to be green, I don't know if Atlas would be like, oh yeah, we're the fourth mystery game at this Xbox Direct. When let's face it, anytime they want to show Persona 6, they make an announcement online and people will go ballistic, and that'll be a massive, massive event for them. Dragon Quest 12, kind of the same way. I'm thinking that's something that wouldn't necessarily be there as a fourth game. A new Tales game, though, that's possible. We have so many Tales games, hard enough to keep track. Why not show a brand new one here? Because, think about how Microsoft had that Visions of Mana trailer and reveal, so you kind of think about, okay, yeah, maybe a new Tales game. A new Devil May Cry game? That Capcom could be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's drop it there. Blue Dragon. All right, now, I know that's not necessarily decades and decades. We haven't had multiple releases of it, but it would be a big game to at least have there and be like, yo, look, there has been a new one being worked on for years, and we're set to get this thing going. Castlevania, that kind of lines up with decades and decades of history, and it'd be cool to see a new one, although would they go the 3D or like 3D style, or would they try to keep it a 2D? Like Symphony, then I'm not sure. The one that I would probably put my money on right now, though, if I had to take a guess and be like, okay, well, it's not Final Fantasy 16 because it's not a brand new game, even though it's in a legendary Japanese franchise and stuff for video games, sure. But it has to be new or a new entry in a storied franchise. How about Ninja Gaiden? That would be interesting. And like the first two were specifically on Xbox back in the day when they came out. Well, the newer Ninja Gaidens, the 3D ones, not the ones way back in the day on like the original Nintendo. That would be awesome to see Ninja Gaiden 4, like Team Ninja and Microsoft, back at it again with a new Ninja Gaiden entry. That would be an awesome surprise. And I do feel like it's the correct size, I guess, of a reveal to be there as a fourth mystery game for an Xbox Direct. Not that the franchise is like super low in terms of everyone's priorities or anything, but it's not necessarily up there and as explosive as Persona 6 or Dragon Quest 12. That one just kind of fits just right. But who knows? It's a mystery game. Let me know your best guess, though, what it could be down in the comments. Next up, let's talk about that Oblivion remake, as we did get new details for the unannounced game, although it seems like people are very, very confident that this is a thing. As we can see, this is a report from MP First, who actually spotted a developer's profile over on LinkedIn as they decided to accidentally disclose a bunch of details on their profile. And they say that it comes from a website of a former Virtuos employee, actually, there we go, whose name we won't disclose for privacy reasons, and who worked on the game from 2023 to 2024. Title is being developed using Unreal Engine 5 and will be fully remade. Brief descriptions, they have 6 gameplay systems that will be reworked, are also provided. So they're going to be working on stamina, sneak, blocking, archery, hit reaction, and HUD. A few I'll go over here, which you can also check out MP First for the whole breakdown. The HUD was changed to make it easier to understand and more aesthetically appealing to young players. So this is a key component for a lot of these older games. Think about how old at this point Oblivion is. It came out in 2000 or beginning of 2006. So we're 19 years from when it initially came out, which it's crazy to think that's how old Oblivion is at this point. But that initial UI really was not set up for things like 4K or just how things have evolved with Skyrim as an example, or you could even use in terms of just in general from Bethesda, all these other titles they've made with Fallout and technically Starfield and stuff. So they have more experience building out the HUD, making it a bit more, as they say, aesthetically appealing in general. Hit reactions were also added to improve the response to damage inflicted on the player and NPCs, which I assume is when you swing your sword and it connects, it actually connects. Like, it feels like you're hitting them. It's not just like this little sound that happens and you don't really see any kind of reaction or anything happening. for the enemy, which is actually an issue that people were bringing up for something like Avowed, if you remember. Like, there wasn't just any impact at all from when you hit someone with your different weapons. Archery was also improved to make it more playable and modern in both third and first person viewpoints. So as expected, you will have third person. Again, same deal there, being able to aim and I guess in that case also when you bring it over to something like the PlayStation 5, which we're kind of expecting at this point across the board for a lot of these Microsoft titles. But just like archery, having that set up with the DualSense controller and the triggers there, but the aiming and everything else. So again, I would go back and try Oblivion now, just see how it feels, because there's a good chance that you're going to go back, play it, and be like, oh yeah, okay, so I see what parts of this have not aged the best. It still has some charm, because I remember when it came out back then, but there are many, many gamers now who weren't even alive when it came out, so think about it that way. You know, maybe some of us are just old, but it'll be really cool to see Oblivion fully remade UE5, and it sounds like it's ready to release this year, so exciting stuff. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a new game reveal that's actually from many of the developers who worked on Witcher 3 at CD Projekt, and we have the trailer, you can see some of it here. And they also had like a gameplay alpha trailer, I guess, being shown, but this was more or less to introduce the title and kind of the vibe for it, which is, I think, pretty interesting. So it's a new single-player, third-person fantasy action RPG. Bandai Namco is publishing it, as you can see their logo right there at the beginning. Started development over 2 years ago in Unreal Engine 5. Full gameplay reveal is coming in the summer 2025, so we're still months off from that. But it is led by former Witcher 3 game director and ex-Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk quest director. Takes place in 14th century medieval Europe. Has a day-night cycle, which plays a big role, and that makes sense considering in the trailer you see what looks to be vampires. So they are mixing in some supernatural elements here, kind of as you expect from the Witcher 3 kind of lore and that sort of setup there. But I like the idea of them doing this with this sort of medieval look, and then you have vampires coming in, and it almost seemed like they were saving someone here. They managed to heal the child that was injured, and your main character becomes what they call a Dawnwalker. You're not human, you're not vampire, you're something in between. Now the game is called The Blood of Dawnwalker, so that kind of makes sense there. And they have almost this time mechanic, which we've seen I guess, like we have the date mechanics and things like Persona, or Metaphor, where time will count down. You have so many days before something happens. In this case, you have 30 in-game days and 30 nights to save your family. It was mentioned that as you do quests, you'll advance time, so it's not like it's always, I guess, running in the background. More or less, as events happen, you will be jumping forward in time. Now, they also mentioned something called Blood Hunger, which is a gameplay mechanic where you need to feed throughout your playthrough, and if it gets too out of control, you might be talking to someone and your character just absolutely demolishes them and eats them. Shinobi did an entire write-up over on Twitter X, just all these different bullet point details, so I'll leave a link to that down below if you wanted to read through more here. But I am very interested in this game, and I'll be keeping an eye on it. Again, it's kind of cool to kind of see that vampire setup here with medieval, and it seemed like the vampire is much more powerful than many of just like the knights and stuff that they had there. So it was, again, I like the idea. I'm curious about the execution when it comes to the timing mechanic, because that can actually get kind of annoying depending on how they pull it off. But I will say they have some serious talent there, with Rebel Wolves being the new studio that was formed in order to create this game. And Bandai Namco Publishing means that they should have a pretty good backing in terms of finances. So hard to say when this game's coming out, if it's been in development for 2 years with UE5, but we'll see more from this game this summer with a full gameplay reveal. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. And that is Game of the Year madness. That is Space Marine 2 versus Neva. And yeah, Space Marine 2 kind of ran over Neva. Neva actually was able to beat out Call of Duty, although I think that was a lot of people voting against Call of Duty, to be honest, and maybe that's showing here, but Space Marine 2, very, very strong title, despite being seated a bit lower just because of the review scores, I guess, that came in for it. So, wow, yeah, strong stuff there from Space Marine 2. And we have some other interesting matchups here coming up actually in the next couple of days that I'm really curious to see how these ones shake out. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Cargo Shorts, who says, pricing an HD remaster higher than the original should be criminal. Well, you know, I've thought about this more and more so, especially after the last 4 or 5 years. And in a way, they can use the inflation excuse, I guess, although it's still weird to see this when it does happen, because it's not like this just started happening with like Nintendo, right? They did Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. That was hot. That was priced more expensive for the Switch versus the Wii U, and it's nowhere near the inflation we have now. So like you can go back to 2010 and then compare it to 2024 and say, okay, $50 in 2010 is $75 or so now. So technically, sure, $60. Steal, right? But it still looks weird. You're right. And to me, this continues to cement more and more that Nintendo is absolutely moving to $70 games, like this generation coming up, like absolutely across the board. And I think it's gonna be for most games. I wouldn't be shocked if we see some remasters or remakes or whatever also test us at that $70 price point. And that's gonna be very interesting if we see something like a Donkey Kong Country HD, like Returns HD, just an example, something comparable like that happen at $70 for the Switch 2 and how those sales are affected. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear about the Switch 2 reveal and how we're only a couple of days away, I'll leave that right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.